Still thinking about Gonzalo Lira. It's a day later. Today is Thursday, August the 3rd, I believe. And I've been checking Twitter, but I haven't seen anything from Gonzalo. And so that's not really encouraging. I hope he's okay. All I can do is pray for him, and I will, and I do. But I wanted to talk about kind of what's related to what's happening there. Well, it's exactly related to what's happening over in Ukraine, and that is the American government. The lifeblood of the American government is war. It's as simple as that. This nation was founded, 250 years ago, something like that, 240. And for the majority of the time, we've been at war. Almost always didn't need to be at war, but we got into war anyway. I would argue, and this is just me, folks, but I would argue we've only had one legitimate war in this nation, and that was the War of Northern Aggression, better known as the Civil War. You might say, what about the American Revolution? The fact of the matter is, British North America was freer prior to the American Revolution, and that's a fact. Maybe the freest nation on earth. As soon as the Revolution happened, here came taxation, and it's been going up ever since. Now, there's a lot of good men and women that have died in these wars that were largely unnecessary, so I don't blame them, but these kingpins in our government, these often unelected bureaucrats who get us in these entanglements, they're responsible. But of course, there's big money in war, as we all know, but we're lorded over in America by these people, elected and non-elected, who just crave power. They'll do anything to get it, and once they get it, they'll do anything to keep it. I don't have any use for any Democrat, and most Republicans, with a rare exception. Rand Paul would be an exception, Thomas Massey would be an exception. But for the most part, there's very little difference. Once they get to Washington, they get what Ron Paul used to call Potomac Fever. And you just can't distinguish from one from the other. I mean, what's the difference in Mitch McConnell or Joe Biden? I don't know. What's the difference in Mitt Romney and pick a Democrat? I don't know. Seems to me like they're all the same. They may say different things when they're running for election or re-election, but when they get up there, nothing ever changes, and we damn well all know it. The government just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, more intrusive, and we wind up invading some country that we got no business invading. I mean, it just never ends. We are over $30 trillion. Trillion, that is an unfathomable number, in debt. And evidently nobody cares. We just continue to run these deficits, yet continue our warring. Now, I said yesterday I was no big fan of Donald Trump, and I'm really not, but I got to tell you, there's one thing at least that Trump did that was a redeeming quality of his. He didn't get us into a shooting war. For that, he is to be commended. Now, he didn't do much to reduce the military, but all presidents and the people that are running for president are always talking about, well, we're going to rebuild the military. Well, it's just a bunch of nonsense. We don't need it rebuilt, for heaven's sakes. But the point is, there was a time in my lifetime when you could distinguish between the two parties, at least in terms of war, because the Democrats, at least back in the 60s and 70s, were like the anti-war party. Of course, they weren't necessarily that in policy, because Johnson was a Democrat, and he had us in Vietnam, wouldn't get us out of that. But there was always at least a wing of the Democratic Party that was anti-war. Well, there's not many anti-war anymore. Not even the most hardcore leftist Democrat is anti-war anymore. Bill Clinton bombed Serbian Orthodox Christians on Easter. They wrote Happy Easter on their bombs they were dropping from the planes. Okay? That was a Democrat that did that. Obama bombed Libya when he was president, Democrat. And Hillary Clinton just rejoiced about that. And now look what's happened to Libya. We're back to the slave trade in Libya since we took out Gaddafi. George Bush lied about Iraq. You know, we get bombed on 9/11 by mostly Saudi Arabians. So what do? Bomb Iraq. Makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, it's just what we do as Americans. And you have to look at this Russian-Ukrainian conflict objectively. And I don't know how many Americans bother with the truth. But all we hear in the media, all we hear from our politicians is how evil Russia is. But let's think about this for a moment. First of all, Russia is not the Soviet Union. Russia's not perfect. Putin's not perfect. But Russia is not the old Soviet Union, okay? So American politicians really need to update their files, but Russia is useful to American politicians. They always want to paint Russia as the bad guy. Oh, Russia is evil. It's the great bear, you know. But we have literally surrounded Russia. And I'm talking about NATO. We have literally just surrounded Russia with NATO countries. Now, think about this from the perspective of Russia. What if America, what if there was another NATO-like alliance that was, that held, and membership was Russia and China? Let's just imagine there was another alliance, just like NATO. It would be called something else, but it would include Russia and China, and they asked Canada to be a part of that alliance, and they asked Mexico to be a part of that alliance. How do you think that would make the United States government feel? Yet that is exactly what we have done to the nation, the sovereign nation of Russia. And America is just constantly on the march, constantly empire building, constantly policing the world. And we bring in these nations which border Russia into NATO. And let's make no mistake about it, NATO is the United States. It's as simple as that. If you see NATO, just think USA. So we surround Russia, and Russia has been provoked by forces within Ukraine for a long time. So finally, Putin responds, as he should, because he's surrounded by NATO. What would you do? But somehow it's bad for Putin to do that. Somehow that's not justified. And Biden gets off by condemning Putin as calling him every name in the book. But like I said yesterday, there's more to Ukraine than meets the eye. I'm telling you, the most corrupt politicians in the world are in the United States government, starting with the top dog, this criminal President Joe Biden. And I don't see it getting any better based on what's behind him. You know, maybe Trump can get back in office. I don't know. I mean, there's just anymore, we're just grasping at straws. I don't know how this is going to end in Ukraine. I hope it'll end rather soon. but it's got to end one way or another. But I'm telling you, sooner or later, somebody's going to respond to the United States in not a nice way, and it's not going to be good, folks. Now I want to say one more thing about it. I am an American. I am a proud American, and I consider myself a patriotic American. But I am not in love with the American government, and I resist what happens is American politicians are really good about creating these enemies and then waving the flag in our face. And they make sporting events places where they almost demand allegiance to the military. They have flyovers and all this kind of jazz. I don't like that thrown in my face, and I'm as patriotic as the next guy. But like, so many of the founding fathers, they didn't believe in a standing army. They didn't believe in this massive military that we have today. They didn't believe in foreign entanglements, but that's how it is today. This military, police, government state that we live in is just too much. It's just too big, and something's got to be done about it sooner or later. I don't know what. Those are my thoughts for the day. I am one concerned American who is ashamed of his government, and I don't know the way forward other than to take care of mine and my own. I wish you all well. Take care. I'll see you tomorrow.